So there was a little disagreement early on about how much we should work and how hard we should work.
At 77, Don Felder, former guitarist for the Eagles, has finally broken his silence about his former bandmate, Joe Walsh, from struggles with substance use, loss, controversies, his time in the band, and their relationship during their time in the Eagles. Join us as we unveil every detail. The different guitar playing styles of Walsh and Felder helped shape the Eagles' sound. Felder's straightforward approach often worked well alongside Walsh's more wild and free style. However, behind the scenes, Felder's departure from the band created a gap between them. Joe Walsh was known for his wild, party-loving personality. Aside from that, he had a much more carefree attitude than Felder. His past, which included struggles with substance use, gave him a rebellious, unpredictable nature that sometimes influenced with playing pattern. Aside from that, his approach to music was able to favor the bluesy guitar solos over the more structured guitar lines Felder often composed. Walsh's tendency to do his own thing sometimes created friction with the more reserved Felder, who was focused on creating polished professional recordings, especially when everyone was more into Walsh than him. Majority of the issues started between Felder and Glenn. Unlike Walsh, Felder was seen as being more disciplined, and his calm, introverted nature often made him seem at odds with the other band members. Felder has said that he was often frustrated by what he perceived as Walsh's lack of commitment to the band, particularly during the 70s and 80s when Walsh's issues and behavior sometimes affected the band's work. Joseph Fiddler Walsh was born on the 20th of November, 1947. He is recognized as an American guitarist, singer, and songwriter, best known as a member of the rock band Eagles. As a young child, Walsh first met the first tragedy of his life when his father, Robert Newton Fiddler, who was a pilot for the United States Air Force, passed on in a plane crash in Okinawa on the 22nd of July, 1949. Walsh was adopted by his stepfather at the age of 5 and given his stepfather's surname, but retained Fiddler as his middle name. During the period of the mid-50s, it was common practice for children to take the name of their stepfather for Social Security, school registration, and health records. Walsh got to acquire his very first guitar at the age of 10, and upon learning the Ventures Walk Don't Run, he then decided that he wanted to pursue a career as a guitarist. One of his major influences at that time was the success of the Beatles. He replaced Bruce Hoffman as the bass player in the locally popular group The Nomads in Madison, New Jersey, beginning his career as a rock musician. During the tragic Kent State Massacre in 1970, Walsh, who witnessed the incident, was deeply affected by it, and after one term, he dropped out of college to pursue his musical career fully. Joe Walsh's contributions to music have been praised by rock legends like Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton, and Pete Townshend, among many others, considering how much impact he was able to make in the music industry with 12 solo studio albums to his name, 6 compilation albums, and 2 live albums. Aside from that, his 5-decade career includes solo work and work in other bands like James Gang and New Zealand's Herbs, among others. He was part of the supergroup The Best and had success as a solo artist and as a session musician. By the break of 2011, he was ranked as number 54 on the list of 100 greatest guitarists of all time. During the period of the mid-60s, just after attending Kent State University, Walsh played with several local Ohio bands before reaching national fame with the James Gang, whose hit was able to showcase his skills. Immediately after he left the James Gang in 1972, Walsh formed Barnstorm with Joe Vitale and Kenny Passarelli. Though the band produced 3 albums, their work was marketed as Walsh solo projects. The last Barnstorm album, So What, which was released in 1974, featured significant contributions from most Eagles members. By the break of 1975, at producer Bill Simchick's suggestion, Walsh joined the Eagles as a guitarist and keyboardist, replacing founding member Bernie Leadon. His very first album with the band was titled Hotel California. Sometime in 1998, a Guitarist magazine reader's poll named the solos by Joe Walsh and Don Felder on Hotel California as the best guitar solos ever made. Aside from that, one time, Guitar World ranked it 8th in the top 100 guitar solos. As a member of the Eagles, Walsh was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1998, and by 2001, the Vocal Group Hall of Fame. As a band, the Eagles were recognized as one of the most influential bands of the 1970s, and till date, they remain one of the best-selling American bands in history. During the period of 1975, when Walsh was invited to join the Eagles as founding member Bernie Leadon's replacement. Initially, members of the band were concerned as to Walsh's ability to fit in with the band, as he was considered far too wild for the Eagles, especially Don Henley. By the time the long-awaited album was released, the album had taken a year and a half to complete, a process which, along with touring, drained the band. The second single from the album topped the charts in May 1997, and this single became one of the Eagles' signature songs. One significant aspect of the album was that it featured Henley on lead vocals, with a guitar duet performed by Felder and Walsh. Meanwhile, the hard rock titled Life in the Fast Lane, on the other hand, was based on a riff by Walsh. It reached number 11 on the charts and helped establish Walsh's position in the band. During the period of 1977, all the other members of the band, apart from Don Felder, performed instrumental work and backing vocals for Randy Newman's album Little Criminals, including Short People, which has backing vocals by Frey and Schmidt. Following the breakup of the Eagles in July 1980, Walsh continued to release solo albums throughout the era, but somehow, sales did not meet the same level of his earlier career. In his personal life, Walsh has also faced his share of tragedies and emotional struggles. He has been married 5 times to Margie Walsh in the 60s, to Stephanie Rhodes in the 70s, then to Juanita Boyer in the 80s, and then he was joined to Denise Driscoll from the period of 1999 to 2006. Finally, by the 13th of December 2008, Walsh got married to Marjorie Bach, who is the sister of Barbara Bach and sister-in-law of Ringo Starr in Los Angeles. By December 1974, it was revealed that Walsh's first solo album released at that time had a few tracks like Help Me Through the Night and Song for Emma, which was more like a tribute to Walsh's daughter who had passed on due to a car accident. She was born on the 29th of April, 1971, passed away on the 1st of April, 1974, at the age of 3, from injuries sustained in a car crash on her way to nursery school. In her memory, he had a fountain and memorial plaque placed in a park in which she played, North Boulder Park in Boulder, Colorado. He has said that the album name So What was a result of Emma's passing, that nothing else seemed meaningful or important in the months that followed. The strain eventually contributed to Walsh's divorce from his second wife. Aside from the personal tragedies he faced, it was also revealed that the singer Stevie Nicks and Walsh had to end their relationship because of their substance use. She got to know about this after Walsh had revealed to her friend and singer Sharon that he's leaving Stevie because he's afraid that one of them was going to pass on and somehow the other one won't be able to save the other person because their habit of substance use has become so extreme that neither of them can live through it. So the only way to save the both of them was for him to leave the relationship. Aside from his struggles with substance use, Walsh has also suffered from attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, and Asperger's syndrome. That's not all. It was also revealed that Walsh also struggled with his use of strong drinks, especially during his early career, and has been in recovery since 1993. By the break of 1994, he woke up after blacking out on an airplane to Paris. When he arrived, he had his passport but did not remember getting on the plane. That was his turning point, and he has been sober ever since. Let's get into the details of his relationship with Don Felder and how he could not stand up to the oppression they faced together. Felder and Walsh are both renowned guitarists who played in the iconic rock band Eagles. Their relationship, while professional, was complex due to different personalities and tensions within the band. By the time Walsh joined the Eagles, Felder, on the other hand, was already a member and had been with the band since 1974. Their collaboration in the band saw them contribute to the band's sound, with Walsh bringing a more blues style of play while Felder added more of the technical approach to guitar. For years, Don Felder found himself sharing the stage with the famous rock band Eagles, thanks to his contributions to the band. While being fired from the Eagles and going through several lawsuits at the band, Felder recently remembered what it was like to play with another legendary guitarist, Joe Walsh, and some of the tragic details of what he went through and their time together in the iconic band. Although his time with the Eagles didn't end as he expected, Felder still remembered the high points of being with the band. Performing all over the world, according to him, he explained a rule that most guitarists kept. It's more like somebody would be playing, and you step back and give them that period, and then they step back and allow you to step forward. Then somebody starts climbing up in their solo, and you go down below and play in a lower tone to support them. And then you cross on the way up and the way down and coming back. It's just things one can't necessarily teach somebody how to do. It's more of a feel. This was more like what Walsh and Felder created during the time they played together. Revealing the unspoken rule among guitarists, Felder mentioned that himself and Joe Walsh really felt that very comfortably to be able to jam together, whether it was in the Eagles or before he joined the Eagles or on Joe Walsh and Friends videos and stuff like that. He further mentioned that they were both able to do all of that even without any prior plan by having just the sensitivity of how another person plays and knowing when to play and when not to play, when to be a support character and when to step in and be a lead character. Despite their differences in playing styles, both Felder and Walsh were key to the band's success. Felder's contributions include the signature guitar solo on Hotel California, while Walsh was known for his skills and energetic stage presence. One thing was significant about the period they played together. While they both helped shape the band's sound, Felder and Walsh did get along personally, but it was speculated that soon, a form of deep resentment began to set in. Felder revealed that at that time, he felt ignored within the band, especially after Walsh's arrival. Walsh, on the other hand, was very free-spirited. Aside from that, his rock and roll background was seen as something wild compared to Felder's own approach. By the break of 2001, when Felder was dismissed from the Eagles due to personal and professional disagreements with Don Henley and Glenn Frey, Walsh, although not directly involved in the firing, was a part of the band during this period, and his role in the band's internal issues was also complicated. Following Felder's departure, there were reports of other internal tensions between him and his former bandmates, including Walsh. However, over time, Felder has mentioned that he's not in bad terms with everyone from the Eagles, though his relationship with some members, including Walsh, was affected after he left the band. As the band met their peak period in the music industry, tensions got worse, especially during the 1970s, when the Eagles became one of the most successful bands of the time. Don Henley and Glenn Frey, the primary creative forces in the band, increasingly took control of the band's direction. At this time, Felder revealed that it was more like Frey and Henley favored Walsh's style more, and Felder was sometimes made to feel like an outsider. He further mentioned that on one occasion during the recording of Hotel California, his work on the title track's iconic guitar solo was praised, but behind the scenes, he felt that his contributions were often downplayed. By the time Felder was fired from the band, a move that sparked a lot of controversy, Felder claimed that he was dismissed due to personal issues with Glenn Frey and Don Henley, but the official reason given was that his contract negotiations had fallen apart. During this period, Joe Walsh, while still a member of the band, was reportedly not as involved in the decision to get Felder out. However, given the nature of Felder's departure and Walsh's close relationship with Frey and Henley, Felder felt that he might have influenced the decision, especially since he stayed on with the band after Felder's departure. This felt more like he had some sort of alignment with the group's leadership. After Felder's firing, the relationship between him and the rest of the Eagles, including Walsh, became strained. Felder felt betrayed by his former bandmates, particularly Frey and Henley, and he later described his bad relationship with Walsh, who he believed was aligned with Henley and Frey during the decision to dismiss him. Aside from that, he also explained how he had some form of personal resentment toward Walsh, particularly over how Walsh's carefree attitude was different from his, and it was more like they all were focused more on Walsh. Unfortunately, following his departure from the band, Felder has mentioned that he and Walsh didn't remain close afterward. Joe Walsh, on the other hand, has generally been more diplomatic about the breakup. He hasn't engaged in much public conflict with Felder and has often downplayed the tensions within the band. Walsh has also expressed more of a focus on enjoying the music, rather than getting caught up in the drama that took place in the band. The relationship between Don Felder and Joe Walsh was a mix of musical collaboration and personal tension. Despite their differences in playing style and personality, both were a major part of the band's success, and their interactions shaped the band's legendary sound. However, the internal strife that plagued the band during the period of their success, combined with the personal tensions that developed after Felder's departure, led to a strained relationship between the two. While there was mutual respect for their musical contributions, the personal issues between Felder and Walsh were never fully settled. Aside from Walsh, Don Felder also praised Tommy Shaw of Styx, discussing how Shaw could play, write, and sing. Felder emphasized on the fact that Tommy is just a monster at that, and for him to be able to have the guitar skills and talent, to be able to play all those solos on the end of the harmonies and everything, and be able to sing, makes him one of the best. Meanwhile, for himself and Walsh, he mentioned that they didn't see that moment as a competition or trying to take the spotlight. Rather, they were able to discover the perfect groove. It was more like they had enough grace to allow the other person to take the lead step and to hold hands going through it. It was never a thing of trying to prove who was better than the other. Rather, it was just a fun challenge to have Walsh play, and then Felder tries to beat that. During the time they played together, on a few instances, Walsh was faced with struggles due to his substance use, and it was revealed that Don Felder had to drive him to rehab. And aside from that, by the time they both got so close to each other, they would leave notes at studios for each other. But following Felder's departure, some people have speculated that Walsh had to agree to not be in contact with him anymore if he wanted to stay in the Eagles. Glenn Frey and Don Felder have never gotten along, and that was no secret. At some point, it was speculated that everything that led to Felder leaving the band was all about money. Glenn and Don Henley thought they should get the majority of the money over Tim, Felder, and Walsh because they saw themselves as the stars of the Eagles. Tim and Walsh never argued this because they accepted that they were just hired hands working on the dreams they planned, but for Don Felder, he had been in the band since the third album and of course deserved a larger share, but unfortunately, that never happened. But somehow, it felt more like the Eagles were always run by Don Henley and Glenn Frey, and while Felder was in the lineup when hell froze over, and the band reunited in 1994. Following his firing from the band, after he questioned the split of the finances, Felder in turn sued for wrongful termination and breach of contract. The suit was settled out of court years later. Felder also mentioned that everything they did in the band was about Don and Glenn. They controlled the band, owned it, and took the highest pay for everything so they could do what they wanted. But he can still feel how angry they were and how much venom they still had toward him, especially Glenn. In the current history of the Eagles tour, Lead-On was welcomed back and performs a number of songs, while Meisner's poor health prevented any participation. Felder was pointedly not asked to take part in the celebration. Still, Felder says he got a kick out of seeing old footage and remembering how skinny they all were and how long their hair was then. Outside of the Eagles, Felder has steadily recorded and toured on his own, as well as with others like the Bee Gees, Diana Ross, and Stevie Nicks, while contributing the occasional song to a film. With no chance at singing in a band that already had 3 lead vocalists, he also had to find his performing voice. Interestingly, it was Felder who scored an early post-Eagles breakup hit in 1981 with the title song to the cult favorite animated film Heavy Metal. Although the tune could have actually appeared on the Eagles' last pre-breakup record, there were rigid constraints writing and recording songs with the Eagles. According to him, he further mentioned that one had to be in Eagles' world, and anything outside of that just didn't fit. Felder also revealed in detail all of what the band was involved with. On the other hand, the disappointment he also felt when Joe Walsh asked him to sign the final contract just so they can get on with stuffs. And he can still be a hired hand, by the way. The big tragedy at the end of it all was the fact that Joe Walsh was content with being just a hired hand, whereas Don Felder was not going to continue like that. Prior to his departure, he revealed that Walsh had told him to just sign the contract, and that was really the last time they ever spoke. Felder had nothing to do with that album, and it was more like the Eagles would have been better off if they had recorded their new album with Don Felder. Aside from that, it was also revealed that these were all the things that he was trying to negotiate behind the scenes, and obviously Joe Walsh told him to just sign the contract. Joe Walsh was more like the guy who gets along so quickly, and somehow he appreciated the band's leadership, whereas Don Felder did not trust their leadership. Ever since Felder left the band, it has been speculated that Walsh must have signed a contract, probably with a clause that does not allow him to hang out with Felder, or even play music together, maybe because they started seeing him as a traitor. Unfortunately, It's quite tragic and sad because these two guys had a great friendship on stage and an amazing chemistry while playing, and were able to create some of the greatest rock music in history. Imagine separating a power combination of talented artists. The most painful part of all these for Felder is the fact that Joe Walsh is unable to stand up for himself and step out of the web. Don Felder's revelations about Joe Walsh are both heartbreaking and enlightening. They offer a clear picture of how much struggles a man who, despite his incredible musical talent, had to go through. Joe Walsh's life has been marked by tragedy, from the loss of his father at a young age to the passing of his 3-year-old daughter in a car crash, alongside the emotional torture he had to go through from all the failed marriages. His struggles with substance use, lack of confidence, and personal demons also affected his relationships, including his friendship with Don Felder. Despite their musical chemistry, Felder and Walsh's personalities and approaches to music led to tension. And even when things got better between them, Felder's departure from the Eagles was a painful experience, and Walsh's decision to stay with the band created a gap between them. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.